Chapter 343, Seal Lionheart 2. The weapon Seal chose from the family treasure vault was the Phantom Rain Sword Javel. Although Javel was a sword, it could also be wielded like a whip. Its attacks were light yet swift and sharp. As intricate as its features were, mastering it proved challenging. But, in the hands of a true master, it allowed for unpredictable attacks infused with various techniques. Even to Eugene, Javel's attributes seemed to align perfectly with Seal. From a young age, Seal had shown an interest in lightweight and swift swords, delighting in striking down enemies by aiming at their weaknesses with precision. "You didn't use it in the Colosseum?" Eugene remarked. "Well, one typically saves their ultimate move, don't they?" Seal responded with a smirk. Indeed, Seal had never drawn Javel in competition. It wasn't a matter of underestimating her opponents, but objectively she'd never met an adversary worthy enough to warrant the blade's use. Had there been such a foe, Seal would have imagined it would be someone ranked within the top 5. "We've sparred countless times since our youth," Seal muttered, drawing the javel from its scabbard. "When I think about it, I've never managed to wound you," she added. "Likewise," Eugene replied with a smirk. "Yeah, but you did that on purpose. You've always won without injuring me," said Seal. While not as often as their bouts at the family manor, Seal had crossed blades with Eugene numerous times. They had often trained with each other in the snowy plains leading to the night march. A victory? Seal had none. She had never managed to inflict any injuries on Eugene. Duels with Eugene always ended the same way. No matter the tactic Seal chose, she was inevitably destined for defeat. Eugene's blade always halted right in front of her throat before she knew it. At those moments there was but one thing Seal could say. "I lost." Each time upon acknowledging her defeat, Eugene would sheath his blade and flash Seal a cheeky grin. This time, Seal thought, I want to see a different expression. She didn't want to see a smile belonging to someone praising a child, but a genuine surprise. She wanted to push Eugene even if just a bit. "If you think about it, I'm his elder sister, right?" For by birth, Seal was born a few months before Eugene. Of course, Seal never truly considered herself Eugene's elder. It was just that she detested being treated like a child by Eugene. Yes, being treated like a child was tiresome. Even during their snot-nosed days, Eugene acted all grown up, treating Seal as if she were the younger one. While it had not bothered her in their youth, Seal started resenting that patronizing demeanor once she matured. A shift. Eugene sensed an emotional disturbance from the tip of Seal's blade. Was it nervousness from their long hiatus? No, this wasn't mere agitation from anticipation. It's ambition, Eugene realized, longing to show more. Or was it the yearning for acknowledgement? Once upon a time Eugene too understood such feelings. In days long past, during his time as Hamel, his blade had trembled under the weight of such emotions. For Hamel, the focus of these sentiments had been Vermouth. He yearned for Vermouth's acknowledgement, wishing to astonish him. For several years after becoming Vermouth's comrade, such emotions tormented Hamel. Reflecting upon it, those feelings had been essential for Hamel, guiding him to grow stronger. The reason he could be so engrossed was that Vermouth was a formidable adversary, someone to be surpassed. Vermouth had crushed Hamel's spirits many times, but he was also the object of Hamel's envy and admiration. A chuckle unknowingly escaped Eugene's lips. Was it because they were twins? Cyan had harbored such feelings toward Eugene, and Seal was no different. In fact, could it be that Seal's craving for recognition was even more profound than that of Cyan or even Hamel? Phew. The tremor at the tip of the blade vanished. Seal could not believe she had allowed her blade to quiver from a mere desire for acknowledgement. "With this, it's no wonder he treats me like a child," Seal rebuked herself. Desire or not, Seal's breathing steadied. "Should I take it easy?" It was a fleeting thought, but Eugene squashed it down immediately. No. Such consideration might be perceived as a grave insult by the other. Eugene knew this all too well. On reflection, Vermouth had been quite the bastard. His so-called considerations were nothing but humiliation for Hamel. With a bit more effort you can do much better. Not long after they became comrades, Vermouth uttered these words to him. They might have been intended as words of comfort for the defeated, but Hamel did not take them as such. "That arrogant brat. How dare you speak such words? How good do you think you are?" "Someday. Definitely." "Well, in the end those words did help me," Eugene acknowledged mentally. He had swung his blade even more furiously. The words had fueled his desire, though it was mostly due to Hamel's prideful nature. Instead of stepping back, Eugene took a step forward. At this action, Seal smiled brightly. Her sword transformed into a whip. Multiple split blades flew towards Eugene's neck, following a curved trajectory. It was an attack so fierce it couldn't merely be deemed a duel. However, Eugene was pleased to see Seal wielding her blade with such determination. There was no hesitation in the strike, no childlike feints. The trajectory of the blade shifted as he evaded the attack, targeting Eugene's neck once more. Clang! Blade met blade. Moments ago Eugene had been unarmed, yet now he held a sword. Though he had repelled the initial onslaught, the assault did not cease. Blades swirled toward Eugene like a storm. With subtle shifts of his sword, Eugene deftly deflected each strike. Seal observed Eugene's movements with wide, startled eyes. Her initial plan had been to slowly wear Eugene down, but she quickly realized the futility of such an attempt. He's on a different caliber. She had known this fundamental truth for some time now. But was the gap truly this vast? Seal took pride in her dueling prowess, but when she faced Eugene she found she couldn't even begin to read or anticipate his moves. That unassuming man wielded his sword as if calculating every outcome. Seal thought perhaps a weakness might show up if she kept up the pressure. But even as she increased the intensity of her attacks, it proved fruitless. Even at her fastest, Eugene's blade remained precise, cutting through the rhythm of Seal's strikes at critical moments and disrupting her flow. Clang! 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 The sound of clashing metal echoed in Seal's ears. The rhythm of her offense was broken, the momentum stolen. And by the time she realized it, the tides of the duel had turned. Just moments before, Seal's aggressive strikes had pressed Eugene, but now she found herself no longer able to advance. She had no choice but to reluctantly step back. To stubbornly move forward or stand her ground was no longer a viable option. Facing Eugene, Seal felt as if she stood before an insurmountable wall. She yearned to scale it, to stand toe-to-toe, but that towering barrier wouldn't allow it. "I hate this." She despised being overshadowed, having to look up and watching from afar, a sentiment that haunted her sleepless nights. Biting her lower lip, Seal reminded herself this was merely a duel. She hadn't expected to defeat Eugene or even inflict a minor wound after only a year of training. But still, she didn't want to lose the same way she used to. That would mean she hadn't changed since her younger days. Even now she was being pushed back with that towering wall ever looming, looking down on her. Biting her lower lip again, Seal relinquished the idea of finding any logical advantage with his blade. From the moment she was forced on the defensive, nay, from the moment she drew her blade, she had already lost. If she didn't wish to accept defeat with a sense of resignation, she only had one option: to thrash with all her might. With a loud clash, Seal's elongated blade tangled with Eugene's. In that instant, Seal threw away her sword hilt and lunged at Eugene with bare hands. What the hell? Eugene was momentarily taken aback. He hadn't expected Seal to abandon her weapon and charge at him unarmed. Seal's primary weapon was the sword. Yet that didn't mean she was ignorant of wielding other arms. Born of the Lionheart lineage, it had been expected for her to master the use of most weaponry from a tender age. However, Seal's most adept skill following the sword wasn't with another weapon. Instead, she was most adept at using her fists and legs. This was an influence of her mentor, Carmen Lionheart. Carmen had taught Seal to fight with her body, and Seal's fists and legs were as sharp as a blade. A clenched fist flew towards Eugene's face. Eugene was caught off guard for a fleeting moment. He too relinquished his sword as the fist came into view. However, it wasn't only Seal who was confident in hand-to-hand combat. Eugene had been as familiar with martial arts as with weapons from his previous life. Whish! Seal's left punch brushed past Eugene's ear. Simultaneously, Seal's right hand twisted in the air, targeting Eugene's chin. Eugene's left arm collided with Seal's right, but in response, Seal forcefully pushed her right arm and entangled it with Eugene's left. But Seal attempted another punch with her left, but it too was caught by Eugene's right hand. Their hands locked together. Seal thrust forward, leaning into Eugene with all her might. Should the two engage in a test of raw strength, it would be impossible for Seal to prevail over Eugene. Pushing forcefully could lead to Seal's injury. Eugene was well aware of this fact. Hence, instead of engaging in a power struggle, he stepped back as Seal pushed forward. In a fleeting moment, Seal's waist twisted, and her sweeping kick landed on Eugene's thigh. It was a blow strong enough to shatter a sturdy oak, yet Eugene remained unyielding. Bam! Instead, it was Eugene's counter that sent Seal flying. Did I kick too hard? For a moment, such a thought crossed his mind. The forceful kick squarely struck Seal's midsection. Sent airborne, Seal crashed ungracefully to the dusty floor. Ugh! Seal groaned in pain while gripping her midriff. With an apologetic expression, Eugene approached Seal. Let's. In the past, their duels would have ended by now. However, Seal had no such intention today. Her belly ached as if her muscles were being torn and her insides were contorting. Ah! Seal screamed, not only in pain but also in frustration, clawing at the ground as she charged at Eugene. Crush. The two collided. Seal wrapped her hands around Eugene's waist, leveraging her weight and mana to push Eugene back. Crush. Eugene fell backward. Seal knew Eugene had purposely allowed himself to be toppled. She didn't ponder upon it but mounted the fallen Eugene. She pinned Eugene's waist with her knees, readying her fists above his head. Yet the rain of punches was stopped in their tracks by Eugene's hands. Eyes wide, Eugene looked up at Seal. Gasping for breath, Seal gritted her teeth, trying to force her punches down. However, Eugene's strength proved too immense. So uncharacteristic of you, Eugene uttered simply. Seal barely managed to part her tightly pursed lips. What exactly do you perceive as characteristic of me? What? Do you expect me to just give up during our duel and laughingly say, "Ah, I've lost again," as if it's the most natural thing? Is that what's like me? Eugene didn't know how to respond to this outburst. Should I just smile like a fool when you offer your hand to pull me up? Or when you pat my head, should I feel good if you comment on how much I've improved? Why are you acting like this? Eugene asked, confused. Why, you ask? With a twisted smirk, Seal continued, to you it seems I'm still just a child. Seal. I hate that. I'm not a child anymore. But why do you still treat me like one? We're the same age. Why do you always treat me as if I'm just a brat? I've never done that, came Eugene's swift denial. Lies. Seal roared. Though Eugene no longer held Seal's wrists tightly, Seal didn't pull away. Instead, she pressed herself closer to Eugene. Their faces were inches apart when Seal whispered fiercely, Look at me, Eugene Lionheart. Don't see me as a child, just see me. Seal. Eugene's gaze shifted, filled with unease. Did I hurt your pride? Yes. Do you despise being treated like a child? Yes. All right, I understand. Slowly, Eugene began to rise off the ground, even with Seal's legs gripping his waist and trying to pin him down with all their might. Yet that couldn't restrain Eugene. As he stood up fully, Seal still clung to him, a hollow chuckle escaping her lips before she murmured, Would it kill you to just take one hit from me? No, came Eugene's blunt reply. Why? Seal asked. You asked not to be treated like a child, remember? Caught off guard by the retort, Seal couldn't help but laugh. That's not what I meant by it, she chuckled. She had yearned to be seen as an equal, not as a child but as a woman. I understand, Eugene said with a bitter smirk. Seal's gaze turned vacant at his words. For a moment she hesitated, then her shoulders sagged in defeat. Bastard. Thud. Seal crashed onto the ground and Eugene hastily pulled her up. Wow. An exclamation came from a corner. Turning his head, Eugene noticed Sienna and Christina, who had returned and were watching the exchange. It hurts more to watch, Christina remarked, recalling how Eugene had thrown Seal to the ground. Sienna shuddered at the sight. Isn't that a bit too harsh, Hamel? Anise approached with narrowed eyes. By your own words, I might lack finesse. But that was a duel and Seal didn't think of admitting defeat. So, Eugene started defending his actions before being interrupted. When she asked you to not treat her like a child, I don't think she meant it this way, said Anise. I said I know. Eugene sighed heavily, casting a glance at the unconscious Seal. What should I do now? Why are you asking me? Anise shot back while reaching out to Seal. Though she'd been thrown harshly, thanks to her naturally resilient body, Seal wasn't severely injured. Let's lay her down for now, suggested Anise. I might be out of the loop here, but when she said not to treat her like a child, did she mean, you know? Sienna cautiously inquired. While creeping up toward Eugene, she continued, you can't be serious. They're siblings, right? Oh wait, he was adopted. But is that even possible? Should you be doing something like that? Why are you asking me? Eugene retorted. Who else am I supposed to ask, you idiot? Shouted Sienna. Why are you swearing at me? What did I do wrong? Eugene was genuinely offended. Seal had always been mischievous since their time together as children. However, he sensed the sincerity behind her actions as time passed. Unlike the Anise of his past life, Seal was more straightforward. Even if Eugene was oblivious to such matters, he couldn't remain ignorant of Seal's feelings and intentions. He thought she was just young, assuming her emotions were fleeting. Yet after witnessing her recent behavior and words, he realized he was wrong. As one matures, feelings naturally evolve or fade. However, Seal's feelings seemed to have developed more than he had previously thought. That damn vermouth. If only he had reincarnated into a less attractive body, none of this would have happened. Eugene was frustrated. He couldn't help but curse Vermouth, who wasn't even present, as he turned away. Chapter 344, Seal Lionheart 3. Bonus image. Even so, wasn't that going too far? Desra asked, exasperated. From dawn, her day had been bustling. Though she rarely participated in combat and held a low rank, Desra was also a gladiator registered with Shimuin. In 4 days, a battle that seemed an assured victory awaited her. She typically would have attended it, but having agreed to join the Pirate Empress subjugation, she had to rearrange her match schedule. That was why she and Carmen visited the Mador Coliseum's owner at the crack of dawn to cancel the scheduled duel. However, by afternoon when she returned to her mansion, she wasn't sure what had transpired in her absence. Desra glared at Eugene, genuinely flabbergasted and angry. You know of Lady Seal's nickname, right? It's the White Rose. The White Rose. Even after more than 30 battles, not a scratch nor even a speck of dust tarnished the immaculate White Rose. Desra shouted. Oh, well. What? What's with the hesitation? Speak, Eugene Lionheart. Even if you and Lady Seal are siblings, even if it was a mere spar, how could you hurl the White Rose to the ground? And on her back, no less. An ordinary person would have died from such a fall. If not death, their spine would have shattered, leaving them confined to the bed for life. Hold on, Eugene interrupted Desra with a grave expression. While he acknowledged the bulk of her claims, something simply didn't sit right with him. Why do you address Seal with honorifics yet speak informally to me? He asked. He wasn't trying to change the topic but instead was genuinely curious. Desra paused momentarily in her fervent attempt to make her point. In that brief instant, her thoughts raced back to nearly a decade ago, back to the bloodline continuation ceremony, where she first met Eugene Lionheart. She remembered speaking informally back then as well. Desra cleared her throat awkwardly while averting Eugene's gaze. I apologize, sir. Very well, Eugene accepted her form of address. But this is a completely different topic. You still did wrong, didn't you, sir? Eugene, why did you throw Lady Seal to the ground? Desra asked. Seal wanted it, answered Eugene. Talk some sense. Who in their right mind would wish to be thrown to the ground? Before Desra could finish, she was interrupted by a stifled chuckle from Sienna, who had been quietly listening to their conversation from the sofa. Caught in the act, she hurriedly covered her mouth with both hands. Utterly baffled, Desra stared at Sienna. Though she wished to ask why Sienna laughed, considering her reputation as the wise Sienna, she couldn't easily bring herself to inquire. She merely assumed there must be a reasonable explanation. What's with calling her Rye? Is it the Rye in Rye tart? Meanwhile, Sienna was immersed in something else entirely and was desperately trying to ignore Eugene's comment about the play on the words from replaying in her head. Coming to Sienna's rescue, Carmen began to address Desra's unfinished question from across the settee. She was simply averse to pitiful sympathy. Next to her lay Seal, now cleaned of the dust from her fall. Carmen gazed momentarily at the face of her disciple before asking, How long do you plan to stay lying down? Seal had come to her senses a while ago. Of everyone in the room, only Desra had failed to notice this. The scrapes from her impact on the ground had been tended to by Christina, so she had no physical injuries remaining. However, Seal felt a gnawing pain deep within. It was especially prominent in the depth of her chest. Seal discreetly bit the inside of her lip in response to the unmistakable pain. I was reflecting on it. Saying so, Seal opened her eyes and sat up. Although it seemed pointless, after being routed like that, there was little to glean from reflection. I don't like the phrase, "it was pointless," Carmen said with a slight bow of her head. Every defeat carries meaning. Even if one is utterly bested, they must find meaning in that defeat. Hearing you say that, I guess it wasn't entirely meaningless, admitted Seal. Did you learn something? Asked Carmen. Yes. I learned that even if it's just bare ground, landing on one's back can be excruciatingly painful, enough to die. Seal shrugged with a playful smirk and continued, but now I feel no pain at all. Is it thanks to the saint? Seal's eyes met Christina's, her face impassive. Seal wore the same playful grin she frequently displayed. But both Christina and Anise quickly saw through the facade. Expressions were no different from masks, and the Saint of Euros had always been adept at changing theirs. It wasn't a grave injury to begin with, Christina said while donning a mask of her own. She thought it necessary. If she revealed her true feelings and looked upon Seal with evident sympathy, it was possible that something might shatter in the prideful young noblewoman. Even thinking that is sympathy, Anise pointed out with a bitter tone, yet Christina did not change her chosen facade. I've treated you, but does it hurt anywhere or do you feel uncomfortable at all? Asked Christina. There are a few things, but I don't think it's something treatable even for you, St. Rogerus, Seal answered before averting her gaze and sweeping it across the room. First she looked at Sienna across the room. Then Seal shifted her gaze away from the couch towards Desra near the window. The naive and good-hearted Desra looked as if she were about to cry, even without knowing the reason why. I have a request. Finally, Seal's gaze settled on Eugene. Staring intently at him, she continued, Lady Carmen, I apologize, but could you leave the room? Desra, you as well. Carmen cherished Seal as a pupil. Though Seal was her great-niece by lineage, her feelings for her disciple were much deeper than those of a distant relative. Carmen silently rose from her seat without questioning her. Yes. Desra obeyed as well. Although she wasn't the wittiest girl, she could feel that this wasn't the moment to question Seal. Then we will also. Christina retreated while glancing at Sienna, who rose from the couch, realizing the seriousness of the situation. No, however, Seal grabbed onto Christina's wrist. Her golden eyes were fixated on Sienna as she said, the two of you must stay here. What? Why? Because you have to, said Seal firmly. Her heart was aching and her emotions were shaky. However, Seal's voice did not betray her true state. Seal was pushing herself to the extreme because she felt it was necessary. Eugene allowed the situation to play out just as Seal was directing it. After all, he was responsible for the current state of things, and he wasn't a coward who would turn his back and run due to the results of his actions. After Carmen and Desra left the room, Eugene stared at Seal before speaking. Seal? I'm going to talk. Seal interrupted him the moment he spoke her name. I have many things I want to ask you. Eugene Lionheart. However, what I'm going to say now is, well, I'm going to say it many times. Well, here's the first. She couldn't articulate her words as she wished. She didn't want to act like this, but it wasn't going as planned. Seal pressed on her aching heart and took a deep breath. When was it? That was her first question. When did you come to know my feelings? She asked. There was no way to beat around the bush. Seal stared straight at Eugene, who was standing by the window. Since a long time ago, said Eugene, looking her straight in the eyes. Long time ago? When exactly? Seal asked. After I was adopted into the main family, answered Eugene. Seal had been 13, and how well could a 13-year-old girl hide her feelings? Perhaps Seal had assumed she had hidden her feelings well, masking them behind her jokes. But it had not reflected on Eugene as such. Although he had also been 13 at the time, he had experiences and memories from his past life. Is that so? Seal nodded with a hollow laugh. It had been 8 years. When Cyan, Seal, and Eugene were 13, they had gone through the bloodline continuation ceremony, and Eugene had been adopted into the main family after being recognized for his skills. Her mother, Ancilla, was wise and calculating. Instead of making an enemy out of the 13-year-old genius, She hoped her children could truly become Eugene's siblings. Eugene could not become the family head as someone from the collateral line. However, she had never been able to rest easily. The 13-year-old boy had shown too much talent. So, although she could have tried to keep Eugene in check, she chose to connect Eugene with the twins through bonds of affection. Don't make an enemy out of Eugene. Build a bond of brotherhood. Shape him so he might become your strength. Don't look down on him for being adopted. Treat him as an equal. Play together, train together, and create memories. Make sure he doesn't harbor any ill will towards you. Make it so that one day he might stand by your side and help you. The words had been meant for Cyan, but Seal had also grasped their essence. Even before hearing her mother's words, Seal was keenly interested in Eugene. He had been a distant relative from a remote village she'd never heard of. Upon his arrival, he had bested her brother on the first day and emerged triumphant in the blood continuation ceremony. To the ever-curious Seal, Eugene was simply too fascinating to ignore. She yearned to grow closer, to become siblings in truth. There were plenty of reasons to do so. From Seal's perspective, the choice had been simple. She'd casually approach, strike up a conversation, and if she sensed any reluctance, she'd press even harder. Raised unrestrained within the clan, the sudden appearance of a new sibling was a novel concept for her. Siblings? At 13, that very word felt alien to her. Yes, back then it was merely a peculiar feeling. That unexplainable sensation which she couldn't quite articulate at that young age, later morphed into a more negative sentiment as adolescence came. Siblings? The notion was absurd. Cyan, her twin, shared both parents. Even Hewitt, her half-brother, shared half her blood. But what about Eugene Lionheart? He was an outsider. That's how she wanted to perceive him. That's how she had to perceive him. He wasn't a brother but a man. Just as she had regarded Eugene that way, Seal Lionheart wished for him to see her the same way. You knew all along. Seal maintained her mask, not ready to reveal the emotions stirring beneath. Why did you? No, that's too cliched a question, isn't it? I know what you're going to say, Eugene. How could you not? You've always treated me the same, whether it's now or 8 years ago. Seal, Eugene said quietly. I know. In your eyes, I'm forever the 13-year-old, the cheeky girl who thinks she's the cutest thing in the world. Not yet, Seal told herself. Trembling, she clenched the fists resting on her lap. I want to ask something different. Not too different. The question is the same. Eugene, when? Seal continued. When did you start dating the saint Christina Rogerus? Seal, Eugene called out once again. Don't tell me you're going to deny it. You too. No, how wait, you folks, spat Seal. The fiery churn within her chest refused to subside. No, it no longer remained a mere pain but an intense heat. It felt as though flames roared inside her very being. Those flames scorched Seal's heart with their searing embrace, tempting her to release their bitter, scathing smoke with her words. Since when? She repeated. Lady Seal. Christina was lost, uncertain of the countenance she should bear. Both Christina and Anise knew that their relationship with Eugene only existed due to Sienna's mercy and understanding. They were painfully aware. Hence, the two saints constantly sought to win over Hamel, or rather Eugene's affections. The mere thought of Sienna rejecting them in their face was horrifying. Though they frequently threw mischievous words and smirks at Sienna, it was their way of defending, of protecting themselves. It was fine to do so since their counterpart was Sienna, as she would understand, given their bond from 3 centuries past. Without such an understanding, they'd be forever at Sienna's mercy. However, their current opponent was not Sienna Meridian but the 21-year-old Seal Lionheart. While Sienna might view the saints as a two-headed serpent, Christina and Anise were not literally so. It hasn't been long, Eugene intervened, not letting the saints reply. He settled opposite Seal and continued. There were signs of the emotions before. I was just too blind to recognize them. Ha, Seal let out a sarcastic laugh while dropping her gaze. After a slight pause she said, Yes, I knew. No, you all were quite obvious. Weren't you, St. Rogerus? Ever since you came to the Lionheart mansion as a guest, you've looked at Eugene with eyes dripping honey. Lady Seal, Christina started. But Seal shot her down. I can understand that. The saint and the hero, it isn't an unlikely pairing. Who had started it? Who fell in love first? Who confessed first? Who was the first to? Seal pressed her hand over her mouth, silencing further questions. She feared the answers that she might hear. She was sure the flames within her had burned everything, leaving only ashes behind. "But this I cannot fathom," she exclaimed, her hand still stifling her mouth. "Saint Christina Rogerus. I can understand. But the wise Sienna? Lady Sienna, what are you?" She knew her question was extremely rude, almost insulting. However, she could not bear it any longer without seeking clarity. "Lady Sienna, you can't, right? You're not from the same generation as us. You realize that too, don't you, Lady Sienna? It's absurd." Sienna could not assume the same demeanor as Christina or Anise. From the moment Seal began her interrogation, everything felt as uncomfortable and torturous as if sitting on a bed of thorns. Sienna merely moved her lips without being able to form a reply. "Of all people. Why would you, Lady Sienna, do this of all people?" Seal's voice wavered with confusion. "We are the descendants of the great Vermouth. And Lady Sienna, didn't you love the stupid Hamel?" Hamel was the one who confessed," Sienna murmured hesitantly. "But you shared the same feelings, didn't you? Fairy tales might differ from true history, but still. This shouldn't be. It cannot be, not ever," Seal continued to voice her doubts. "What shouldn't be?" Eugene intervened with a deep sigh once again. "Emotions don't adhere to absolutes, Seal. You dare to tell me that?" Seal's voice cracked with anger. "Now you say emotions aren't absolute? You who always treated me like a mere child, dare to say that?" Dizziness overwhelmed Seal. Eugene attempted to speak, but Seal swiftly cut him off with a gesture. She didn't want to hear his response. She was afraid. "When did it begin?" Seal pressed, asking the same question. "With Lady Sienna? From your first trip to Samar?" Eugene just looked at her silently. "Why won't you answer?" "Fine, I won't push. Instead, I'll ask something else. Who was first?" Seal questioned unrelentingly. "What do you mean by that?" Eugene responded. "Ha ha ha ha." Seal unconsciously started laughing at this answer. Who was it? Who fell in love first? Who confessed their feelings first? Who was first? Between Lady Rogerus and Lady Sienna, who was it? The question seemed to baffle everyone present. A heavy silence enveloped the room, during which Seal laughed bitterly. "Eugene, I don't blame you. Honestly, I might be the strange one. After all, we are siblings, right? But think about it. When all this began, we were only 13. Do you understand what I'm getting at? We've spent more time as strangers than as siblings." Seal could no longer keep her composure. She could no longer keep her hand clamped over her mouth. "Who was it first?" she repeated, determined. There were no facades left for her to hide behind. She could not. Seal wobbled to her feet, and though Christina reached out to steady her, Seal brushed her off fiercely. "It was me," Seal confessed, her vision blurring. "It wasn't Lady Rogerus or Lady Sienna. It was me, Seal. Eugene Lionheart, I was the first to see you." Tears ran hotly down her cheeks. The burning sensation felt as if flames blazed from her eyes. "I was the very first to adore you. I who you always saw as a mere brat. It was I who loved you before anyone else." Everyone stayed quiet at Seal's distressing declaration. "But why?" Seal staggered forward to approach Eugene. "Why can't I? Why do you only see me as a child? Why can't I be a woman to you? What was I lacking?" Unfiltered words spilled from her lips. "Don't feed me the nonsense that there wasn't enough time. I've known you since we were kids. Just as you've seen me grow, I've watched you too. I no longer see you as a child, so why can't you see past my youth?" He felt pitiful. "I don't understand what I'm missing. Am I ugly? Lacking charm? Is it my temperament? Because my personality is crap? If it's any of that, I can change." "It's not that," Eugene said firmly. "Then what is it? Why can't it be me?" Seal cried out through her tears. The gazes of those around her no longer mattered. She didn't think of how she'd face the world after this. She reached out and grasped Eugene's shoulders tightly. I told you I saw you before anyone else. Liked you and loved you before any other. Still the same. That's not true," said Eugene. The tears that Seal shed were painfully clear. Eugene could feel their heaviness as they trailed down her face and dropped from her chin. The way her hands trembled as she clutched him shook Eugene's heart. "It wasn't you who first saw and loved me," he said. "What are you saying? I am not the Eugene Lionheart you know." He didn't wish to lie to Seal as she sobbed. "I am Hamel," he admitted. "What? Hamel Dines. I am the reincarnation of Hamel who died 300 years ago." Eugene sighed deeply as he confessed. Seal's tear-filled eyes went blank. He had to believe him. That's what Eugene hoped for. It pained his heart, left it raw and constricted, but he thought this revelation would make Seal understand and retreat. "What?" Seal's trembling lips parted. "So what about it?" Chapter 345. Seal Lionheart 4. Stepping back gracefully might have been a choice. Seal's feelings belonged to those first born by a 13-year-old girl. Moreover, there was a saying, first love often remained unfulfilled. So she could have consoled herself, saying it was inevitable, and moved on. Seal knew she was no longer the child she once was. There was a transition from being a child to an adult, the process called aging. It involved learning through various experiences, the time one lived and the years left ahead. Going forward, she might realize how insignificant the emotions she harbored as a child were. She could have sought solace in the thought of inevitability. If she deemed it a matter not meant to be, despite it being her first love, then even if she cherished those feelings. If the other built affection with someone not her, then perhaps. She didn't want to label such things as victories or defeats. But what if she was forced to acknowledge it as a defeat? She was still young and the world was vast. Maybe someday. Maybe, just maybe. What? But Seal Lionheart didn't desire such consolation. First loves often remain unfulfilled? What nonsense were they talking about? Sure, some might bitterly murmur these cliched, trivial words. But Seal did not think that way. Who was to say that the feelings of a 13-year-old were trivial? Why did the time ahead matter more than the time past? Did it matter more because there was more time left ahead of her? Utter nonsense. If anything, the longer life she had to live made relinquishing her current feelings impossible. Through her experiences and coming to better understand the world, she found conviction in her feelings. With age, her emotions had only deepened. As an adult, she deeply cherished the feelings she'd held since childhood. Thus, she couldn't settle for mere consolation. The emotions she'd built from their first encounter made Seal believe in their destined connection. First love. That he didn't reciprocate her feelings and love her? Choosing someone else over her? Defeat. Tears streamed as Seal gritted her teeth. Victory or defeat? Above all, Seal couldn't accept such a notion. From the start, Seal Lionheart had never truly fought, not even once. In fact, she had never even truly confronted Eugene. True, Seal was still young and the world was vast. But there was one thing she was sure of. In a realm where time felt expansive, she knew that in the many decades or centuries she might live, she would never again harbor emotions as pure and desperate as those she'd felt when she was but a 13-year-old girl on the cusp of adolescence. No matter how vast the world was, the possibility of encountering someone superior to her first love seemed unfathomably slim. Pretending to be haughty, engaging in playful mischief, or letting out a sly smile offered no aid in moments such as this. If one's feelings were pure and desperate, the display had to be equally fervent. Please look at me, please don't abandon me. Even if it was pitiable and wretched, she had to cling. Pitiable and wretched. Was it really? Not in the slightest. Seal felt no ounce of shame in the tears she shed or the desperate cries she let out. She had no intention of preserving any semblance of dignity, nor did she wish to stand idly by while offering a docile smile. She had resolved to fight, to thrash and wail in the mire of her emotions. And she did just that. "What about it?" she demanded. "What did he just say?" Reincarnation. It wasn't long after Eugene uttered that word that Seal responded. Merely a few seconds, though it felt like an eternity to them all. Christina, Anise, and Sienna were utterly bewildered. The two saints might not have known everything about Seal, but they were well aware of Miss Lionheart's pride, her haughty demeanor, and her mischievous nature. To see her weeping and lamenting was enough to leave them in disarray. But to bring up reincarnation not to anyone else but to Seal? To someone he had known since childhood? Or maybe it's... Sienna swallowed hard while glancing at Eugene. Though she knew little about Seal, suggesting reincarnation at this juncture seemed a wise move. The young lady's heartbreaking cries were too painful to bear. But if she were to find out that the object of her affections was not her lifelong companion but the reincarnation of a hero from 300 years prior, perhaps she'd accept the cliched, "It's inevitable" reasoning. After all, it wasn't a lie and couldn't be helped. "You're the reincarnation of Hamel?" Seal asked. Of everyone in the room, the weight of time seemed heaviest on Seal. "Hamel's reincarnation," he said. The moment she heard those words, a cascade of memories from the age of 13 flooded her mind. It was an almost unbelievable revelation. Yet strangely, Seal didn't doubt it. The idea of reincarnation alone cleared many uncertainties she held about Eugene. "So, what of it?" Seal spat while clutching her chest. She bore no skepticism. Eugene Lionheart, whom she had known for 8 years since she was 13, was the reincarnation of a hero from 300 years ago, Hamel. "Just because you are that person, does it mean you're not the Eugene Lionheart I know?" Her tear-filled inquiry left Eugene visibly stunned. Seal continued, gasping for breath, struggling against Eugene's grasp on her wrist. She declared with unwavering certainty, "It matters not whether you've been reborn. You are Eugene Lionheart. It was as Eugene Lionheart that you came into my life." He hesitated, but Seal cut in, "You once said it wasn't me who loved you first." "No, I don't see it that way. Because to me, you are not Hamel but Eugene." It might have been a feeble argument, but Seal wasn't bothered by that. From her earliest memories, she was one to obtain what she desired by any means necessary. And at that very moment, or rather throughout the entirety of Seal Lionheart's existence, the man before her was what she desired the most. So, she reached out, grasping Eugene's shoulders once more. Tears had blurred her vision, and the heartfelt words she had spoken earlier made her breathing ragged. Her heart ached, feeling as if it had been utterly consumed by flames. All that was left was a pile of ashes. So, she hesitated momentarily as she searched for the right words. "Humiliation? See me," she pleaded while lowering her head. It definitely wasn't. Eugene was at a loss for words. He didn't simply see Seal as a sister. If he had to put it in words, she was merely a kid, a child he had known since she was little. And that child now pleaded with him to not see her as such any longer? Eugene didn't know what to say. From Seal's perspective, Eugene had always been gazing at something in the far distance. But the distance she had felt wasn't limited only to his gaze but to him as a whole person. Eugene himself felt distant from Seal. Now she finally understood why he had treated her and her twin as mere children. She continued, "I am right here." Eugene Lionheart was lost in memories from 300 years ago. He was prioritizing a bond forged in a distant past. She forced out in a broken voice, "I'm here with you as well." Her voice was hardly elegant. Crying had strained it, making it raspy. "Coward," Seal muttered, her eyes red and swollen. She forced a smile. "Stop running from the present, Eugene Lionheart. Even if you were Hamel in your past life, now you are Eugene." He remained silent, absorbing her words. "All you've said feels cruel and cowardly to me. After all, you never truly responded to my feelings," Seal pleaded desperately. Eugene closed his eyes, a whirlwind of emotions coming out as a sigh. The emotions that didn't escape weighed heavily on his tongue. He realized that saying nothing at that moment and avoiding her gaze was indeed the act of a coward. Eugene slowly opened his eyes. His voice wavered, hindered by bloodshot eyes brimming with tears. Although Seal's words varied in tone, the emotions laden in each phrase always weighed heavy, even piercing, feeling as if they tore him apart. "I've never looked at you that way before," Eugene said. Seal's eyes wavered. "I might have noticed you looking at me that way, but I've never felt the same. Telling me not to flee from the present." "Seal, such words seem cruel to me," Eugene whispered. Seal's shoulders quivered, trembling with suppressed emotion. Eugene continued, "Because in my past life I was a fool. I died like one, and as if that wasn't enough, I was reborn. I don't even know why I was granted another life. But when I learned how the world had changed after my reincarnation, do you know what I first thought?" Eugene forced a bitter smile and shook his head. "It felt like shit," he admitted, pausing for breath. "When I died as Hamel, I thought I had settled all my regrets, but that wasn't the truth. I was a coward, fleeing from challenges that became insurmountable. Now given another life, how can I turn away from my past?" Seal furiously wiped away her tears. Perhaps my answer seems cowardly to you, but that's who I am. As you said, I am now Eugene, but I am also Hamel. That is why I can't share the same feelings you hold, Eugene replied firmly. I don't care, Seal whispered, tears once more rolling down her cheeks. Even if that's how it has been all this while, starting from today or tomorrow or even from now on. She couldn't finish her sentence. She covered her mouth with her hand, trying desperately to stifle her sobs. Her heart felt shattered, emptied of all emotions. Her cries broke free no matter how hard she tried, for her hands were too small to keep them in. But why did it come to this? Why could she not have what she desired the most? Why could she not hear the answers she sought? Seal's heart-wrenching sobs echoed through the silent room. Watching her, Sienna's eyes, too, began to glisten with tears. Trying to keep her own emotions in check, she tilted her head back and attempted to divert her thoughts. However, even the legendary archwizard couldn't stop the flood of tears that threatened to spill. But Sienna wasn't the only one weeping, for a sea of tears had long since formed within Eugene's cloak. Rhaenyra was incessantly rubbing her eyes while shedding torrents of tears, while Mare bit hard into the hem of her dress. Tears were streaming down her face, but she managed to keep her sobs silent. "It doesn't matter," Seal whispered again. She could do nothing but repeat her words. "Even if you've never looked at me that way, even if you don't share my feelings, I don't care." She had braced herself for this moment long ago, thinking she could bear it all. "But please do not despise me," Seal's voice broke and she couldn't finish her plea. Despise. The mere utterance of the word was so unexpected that Eugene's eyes widened in shock. "Wait, Seal, what in the world?" Eugene couldn't even finish his sentence. Crush. A shattering noise echoed, causing everyone to startle and look up. St. Rogerus? Beneath Christina's feet, the smooth marble floor had cracked. Thud, thud, thud. As Christina walked, shards of stone stuck to her shoe soles fell away. They left deep, clear footprints as Christina approached Seal with long strides. "What in the—" Seal too was interrupted. Flap. A fierce slap turned her face to the side. All present were stunned, their mouths agape. Eugene, in particular, was so alarmed that he grabbed Christina. "Why would you strike a child?" he shouted. "What did you just say?" retorted Christina. "What?" Eugene was baffled. "Sir Eugene, repeat your words," Christina said in a dangerously quiet voice. "No, why are you hitting a child?" Sensing danger, Eugene didn't finish his sentence. The tense atmosphere made his body react instinctively. Whoosh. A sharp slap narrowly missed Eugene's face. "Did you dodge?" Christina asked sternly. "Wait," but Eugene was interrupted before he could say much. "Do not avoid it." It was unclear whether it was Christina or a niece. In truth, it didn't matter who it was. If he dodged, the retaliation would only be worse. Swish. Another slap turned Eugene's head to the side. "Lady Seal is not a child," Christina declared with an eerie glint in her eyes. "Oh God above." A niece who had been crying silently instinctively sought the heavens upon witnessing Christina's unexpected act. "And Lady Seal," Christina's head snapped around. Seal was staring at Christina while holding her stinging cheek. She could not comprehend why she had been slapped. "No. Seal," Christina spoke with a soft yet commanding voice, then took long steps towards her before asking, "What are you doing now?" What do you mean?" Seal asked in a daze. "You have insulted me," declared Christina. "Insult?" Seal struggled for a response, her lips merely quivering. No defense or counter came to mind. Christina glared at her and continued, "It's blatant arrogance and insult resulting from it. You also ignored me. You acted as if your love for Eugene now, not the Hamel of the past, was all that mattered." But Seal tried to argue, only to be shot down immediately. "If this isn't an insult or neglect towards me, what is it?" said Christina. "Did I say something wrong? St. Rogerus, aren't you also looking at the hero, not Eugene? Besides, you believe that Eugene has been reborn." Again Seal couldn't finish. A sharp slap met her cheek. "You're mistaken. Even though it's not worth arguing, Seal, your crying seems to have clouded your thoughts. Because Eugene looked at me as a person, not the saint. I also look at him not as a hero but as Eugene. Reincarnation? I don't bother with such matters. I, Christina Rogerus, Love the current Eugene Lionheart. Why? What did I do wrong that you should strike me? Seal shouted while gripping Christina's collar. She had already been devastated, but the saint had slapped her twice to add insult to injury. Yes, I may have insulted and ignored you. But there's no reason for you to hit me. I knew Eugene before you. I was the first. You were the one who just watched, Christina said with a smirk. Yes, you've seen Eugene Lionheart since he was a child. But that is all, isn't it? You ask not to be treated as a child, but right now you're crying and throwing a tantrum just like one. Foolish. Saint Rogerus. Seal warned. Of course, as a compassionate saint, I won't disregard your wish. As you've wanted, I won't treat you like a child. Christina's lips curled up into a smile. So, I mock you as an equal. What did you do while Lady Sienna was sealed? What did you do before I met Eugene? Maybe you always pushed back your feelings, thinking someday later. Oh, I see, Seal. You were scared, weren't you? Scared of confessing in case the sibling bond disappeared. Seal's face paled. Looking into Seal's tear-filled eyes, Christina whispered, "What did you lack? You lacked courage. That's why you're here now, crying and clinging. Your arrogance and fear made you lose Eugene." At these words, Seal lost her rationality. In a fit of emotion, she slapped Christina. Although Christian could have avoided it, she didn't. He didn't need to. From the moment Seal's hand touched her face, Christina was enveloped in a protective light. What? Words failed Seal. What's wrong? Are you angry? Christina asked with a smile. Angry? Of course she was. She was furious to the point of madness. What stoked Seal's fury even more was the fact that Christina's words were true. Tears spilled down Seal's eyes as she took ragged breaths. So will you give up? Christina asked. Shut up. Seal whispered. So you don't want to give up, is that it? Christina's mocking smile vanished. Warmth infused her previously icy voice. Of all those present here today, she had resonated the most with Seal's words. You don't want to lose to a distant past you barely know, do you? Seal looked at Christina as she voiced Seal's inner thoughts. You yearn for him to see you here and now, don't you? Christina asked as Seal's eyes widened listening to those words. Regardless of who stands by his side, you wish to stay with him, don't you? Christina continued with another question. Seal could no longer keep her hand on Christina's collar. Stumbling backward, she collapsed onto a couch, finally mumbling, "It's only natural. If that's truly how you feel, merely asking not to be disliked won't suffice." Christina reached out to Seal. Thinking of the stinging slaps she had received earlier, Seal instinctively took a defensive stance. But there was no slap this time. You must make him love you. Christina clenched her fist in front of Seal with pride. Not just plead to not be disliked. You must strive to make him love you. Saint Rogerus? Seal was perplexed at this sudden declaration. Wrong. With a resolute expression, Christina shook her head. Call me sis. What? Seal thought she must have misheard. Call me sis, Seal. Christina then opened her clenched fist and used that hand to lift Seal up. Let's go to my room. Why? Seal asked, still shocked. We have much to discuss, Christina said simply. Without waiting for Seal's reply, Christina forcefully dragged her. Seal's resistance was futile against her uncharacteristically firm grip. Sienna, who had been empathizing with Seal's emotions and crying bitterly, was suddenly startled by the sound of a slap and the ensuing reproach. Gathering herself, she attempted to follow Christina and Seal. Do not come, Lady Sienna, shot Christina. Why? Sienna asked, bemused. You've known Sir Eugene since his past life, haven't you? Christina said sarcastically. Sienna was met with a piercing gaze. Then what about a niece? Sienna wanted to blurt it out, but the stern look of the current saint forced the legendary arch-wizard, who had lived for 300 years, to quietly remain seated.